Ever since I was a kid, I believed that a single spark could transform even the most ordinary day into an extraordinary adventure. I suppose that's why, on an impulsive, warm spring afternoon, I found myself rummaging through my garage for scraps of wood, old paint cans, and any remnants of forgotten projects. I had this wild idea, one that seemed half rebellious, half poetic, that I could take a tiny bit of discarded wood and fashion it into a sanctuary for books, a beacon of community and creativity in my otherwise drab suburban neighborhood. I wasn't exactly looking for accolades or approval. Deep inside, I just wanted to cultivate a connection, a shared love for stories that could bridge the gaps between strangers. That's how I built my little free library. The process started with the feel of rough wood under my fingers, the satisfying sound of nails driving into place, and the smell of freshly cut timber mingling with the scent of new paint. I spent the better part of an entire weekend meticulously sanding, assembling, and painting each plank until it shimmered with a hopeful, rebellious blue. I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity and brilliance of my own undertaking. There I was, in my front yard, defying the rigid rules of our homeowners association, HOA, and I felt an exhilarating sense of purpose. I filled the little library with books that I personally adored, some dog-eared classics, some quirky mysteries, and even a few dog-eared paperbacks that had seen better days. I carefully arranged them so that each one had its own little space on the shelves, waiting for a reader to claim it as theirs. I didn't publicize my deed. It was meant to be my quiet act of defiance and a small gesture of hope. I knew my HOA would have nothing to say about it until it became impossible to ignore. Sure enough, it wasn't long before an envelope with the unmistakable crest of our HOA slid under my door. I still remember the crisp sound as I tore it open, the stern, cold words leaping off the page in black ink. Unauthorized structure, violation of community standards, and immediate remediation required. My heart pounded, and for a moment, I questioned my sanity. Had I really crossed a line that I couldn't uncross? But then, amid the echo of my doubts, a curious feeling welled up inside me. Determination. I thought, maybe this is exactly the spark we need. The next morning, I found my front lawn transformed. A little girl from down the street, her eyes wide with wonder, tugged at her father's hand and pointed at the bookshelf. I could see the excitement in her smile as she carefully pulled a copy of a beloved classic from the shelf. Later that day, while I was tending to some garden weeds, I overheard snippets of conversation among neighbors. They were talking not about the violation letter, but about the charming, unexpected addition to our neighborhood. One man mentioned how the sight of a brightly painted box brimming with books had made his morning walk feel magical. Another woman remarked how it reminded her of simpler times when communities shared, rather than isolated themselves behind closed doors. As days turned into weeks, the little library evolved into something far bigger than I had ever imagined. Every morning, I would return to the sight of a row of familiar faces gathered around the bookcase. Neighbors stopped by, not merely for a book, but for a conversation. A brief chat exchanged under the warm glow of a rising sun. I began to notice the subtle shift in the neighborhood's rhythm. There were impromptu conversations over shared literary interests, recommendations passed from one person to the next, and even small gatherings that felt like mini book clubs forming right on the sidewalk. I remember one sunny afternoon when an elderly man, Mr. Jenkins, whom I had only ever nodded at in passing before, sat on my curb and slowly opened a book he'd just taken. He looked up at me with a twinkle in his eye and said, "You know, I haven't felt this connected in years. This little box of books is like a window back to a community I'd almost forgotten. Those words reverberated through me. I realized my small act of rebellion had awakened something deeply human in us all, the desire to connect through stories. But not everyone saw it that way. Along with the growing chorus of approval, I began receiving more disapproving letters from the HOA. The warnings grew sterner with each passing day, and one particularly chill. One evening, I found myself staring at a new notice detailing fines and deadlines for removal. I felt a wave of panic and helplessness. But then I recalled the ripple of joy that the library had already started to create. I took a deep breath and decided that this fight wasn't just for me. It was for every neighbor who had found solace or excitement in those pages. I attended the next HOA board meeting with my heart pounding and hands clammy. The room was packed with both staunch traditionalists and a scattering of enthusiastic residents whose eyes gleamed with a desire for change. As I walked up to the front, my voice trembled at first, but soon I found my footing in the shared belief that sometimes breaking a rule could lead to something beautiful. I spoke from my heart. I built this library knowing it would upset some of our community's norms. But what I didn't anticipate was the immense power of sharing, a power that has connected our neighbors in ways unimaginable. We are not just a community of houses or strict guidelines. We are a community of people who crave connection, who find comfort in a shared story, and who want to feel that our voices matter. The room was silent for a moment, pregnant with anticipation. Then a ripple of support began to build. I saw nods of agreement, saw hands raised in solidarity, and even heard soft murmurs of appreciation. Suddenly, the board's stern expressions softened into ones of contemplation. In an unexpected turn of events, the board decided to revisit the rules. They allowed a temporary moratorium on the removal orders while community feedback was collected. Over the next few weeks, I organized informal gatherings around the library. People came with homemade snacks, they brought their children, and they shared their own store. Eyes of books that had changed their lives. I listened to tales of lost love found again in a favorite novel, of families bonding over bedtime stories, and of lifelong friends rediscovering the magic of reading. Every story, every smile, every tear shared in that humble front yard became a testament to the power of what one small box could achieve. One particularly memorable gathering was on a rainy Saturday. I had set up a makeshift tent near the library to protect the books, and a small crowd had gathered, seemingly defiant of the dreary weather. Among them was a young couple who introduced themselves as recent transplants to the neighborhood. They confessed that they had felt alone ever since moving, disconnected from their surroundings in a city that felt too big and impersonal. But here, in that little glow of community spirit, they finally felt at home. Books have a way of making the invisible visible, the woman said softly, wrapping her arms around her partner. I've always believed that every story shared here is a step towards building the kind of neighborhood we all dream of. Their words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply with everyone present. As more months passed, the little library became a catalyst for change in our neighborhood. It sparked a reading revolution that spread like wildfire, overcoming the narrow-mindedness that had once dominated the HOA's strict enforcement policies. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now exchanged books and formed small clubs that met regularly, not just around the library, but in local parks, coffee shops, and even in some of the older, unused community centers. I saw teachers incorporate the library into their lesson plans as a discussion starter on literature and community, and local businesses even start donating books and supplies to keep the library well-stocked. One crisp autumn day, I received another envelope from the HOA, this time with a different tone. The letter announced that, in light of overwhelming community support and unanimous feedback from many of my neighbors, the board had voted to amend the guidelines. They were now officially permitting little free libraries in our neighborhood, and even going so far as to offer resources to help residents build their own. I still remember the shock and elation of that moment. I had gone from being the lone rebel, defying the status quo, to becoming a symbol of something much larger, a symbol of community reinvention. I walked outside, almost in disbelief, and watched as a group of children, who had become regular visitors, turned to me with wide smiles and cheered, "You did it." Their unbridled joy was the most rewarding validation I could have ever hoped for. In the following months, I helped several neighbors set up their own libraries. I spent countless afternoons advising on design and brainstorming themes, from a whimsical fairy tale nook to a rustic, vintage novel corner. Each creation was unique, a direct reflection of its steward's personality and the diversity of our community. I remember one neighbor, Ms. Ramirez, who infused her library with vibrant murals depicting scenes from Latin American folklore. Another, Mr. Thompson, created a mini library that doubled as a tribute to classic jazz musicians, with soulful vinyl records beside the books. These efforts were not merely acts of defiance against outdated rules. They became a collective act of storytelling, where each library served as a microcosm of our neighborhood's multifaceted spirit. I began to document these transformations with a worn-out mirror and a journal, scribbling down anecdotes of connection, perseverance, and transformation. I published blog posts and shared videos on social media, inviting other communities to take heart from our journey. I received messages from people far beyond my suburban street, messages from small towns, urban neighborhoods, and even from countries across the globe, sharing their own stories of how a simple act of sharing a book had changed their lives. One message from a resident in a rural village, thousands of miles away, simply read, "Your library has inspired us to start our own. Thank you for reminding me that even in isolation, community can thrive." My own perspective on reading and community underwent a transformation during this time. I had always loved books, but now I understood that they were more than just a source of escape or entertainment. They were bridges to empathy, vehicle is for understanding diverse human experiences, and catalysts for change. Standing in front of my little free library on quiet evenings, with the warm glow of street lights illuminating the rusted metal of the bookshelf, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. I saw not just a box filled with books, but a living, breathing testament to resilience and hope. I also became intimately aware of the power of literature in fostering social change. I began reaching out to local authors and poets, inviting them to give readings at community gatherings. The library became a stage for open mic nights where voices previously unheard found a platform. In one particularly moving session, an elderly poet recited verses about loss, love, and the bittersweet passage of time. Her words brought many of us to tears, and in that moment, the library transcended its physical form. It became a sanctuary of shared human experience. Throughout this journey, I encountered moments of doubt and frustration. Late at night, after a long day of meetings, community events, and endless emails, I sometimes wondered if I had done the right thing by defying the HOA. I recalled the stern notices, the disapproving looks from some longtime residents, and moments when I felt utterly alone in my vision. But then I would remember the little girl laughing with her father, the camaraderie at the mini book clubs, and the palpable change in our community's atmosphere. Every time I saw a book exchanged, every time I overheard a neighbor discussing a shared favorite story, I was reminded that I had set something extraordinary in motion. One winter, as frost crept over the neighborhood and the library stood dusted in snow, I found myself reminiscing about how far we had come. Even during the biting cold, the library continued to serve as a beacon. I remember an old acquaintance, Mr. Davis, trudging through the snow to retrieve a cherished volume he had lent years ago. He told me how the library had been a constant reminder that regardless of the weather, the warmth of community never fades. His words, simple yet profound, reaffirmed my belief that what we had built was not just a physical structure, but a testament to the resilience of human connection. By the time spring returned, our neighborhood had transformed completely. What began as a solitary act of defiance had grown into a vibrant network of community reading spaces. I spent one bright, breezy afternoon walking down our block, marveling at the array of little libraries that now adorned driveways, front yards, and even corners of local parks. Each one told its own story, a story of creativity, of reclaiming public space, and most importantly, of bringing people together. I realized that my small act had not only changed the physical landscape of our neighborhood, it had sparked a cultural shift, one that celebrated sharing and placed value on communal well-being over rigid conformity. Over time, the library became a part of my identity, inseparable from the person I had become. I began leading workshops for neighbors interested in starting their own reading spaces, offering advice on everything from sustainable building practices to effective community outreach. I witnessed firsthand how literacy could act as an equalizer, leveling the playing field in a society where many felt marginalized. As more people joined the cause, our collective efforts started attracting local media attention. Articles were written about our neighborhood's transformation. Local TV segments featured our little libraries, and even the city council began to acknowledge the positive impact we had made. I remember the pride I felt as I saw our community come together, united by a shared love of reading and a shared vision for a more connected future. There were times when the journey was overwhelming. I spent hours responding to countless emails, fielding questions from curious residents, and managing the logistics of the expanding network of libraries. I juggled the pressures of daily life with the demands of this passion project, often burning the midnight oil just to keep everything running smoothly. But every challenge only reinforced my resolve. I learned that change rarely comes easy. It demands persistence, courage, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Looking back, I now understand that my decision to build that little free library was more than an act of rebellion. It was a declaration that our neighborhood, Odd, could be more than a collection of brick and mortar. It was a call to redefine what community means in a world that often feels fractured and isolated. I learned that even when rules stand in the way, the human spirit finds a way to break through, to innovate, and to create spaces where stories are shared and differences are celebrated. This journey taught me that a single idea can ripple outwards, igniting change in places you never expected. I often think of that first letter from the HOA, the moment of fear that quickly gave way to a deeper understanding of what it means to belong, to be part of a community that values connection over conformity. I realized that my act of building a little free library was not just about the books. It was about creating a legacy, a living testament to the idea that every small act of kindness, every shared story, can contribute to a larger narrative, hope, and transformation. Now, as I stand in front of my library on a quiet, cool evening, watching the neighborhood come alive with conversation and laughter, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Every time a book is taken, every time a new title is left behind, every time a neighbor stops to share a piece of their heart, I am reminded that the true power of a community lies in its willingness to connect, to share, and to dream together. I built a little free library, and in doing so, I helped ignite a reading revolution. A revolution that transcended simple defiance and turned into a movement of love, inclusivity, and relentless hope. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire journey, it's that change often begins at the grassroots level. It begins with a single person daring to challenge the status quo, with one person deciding that instead of waiting for permission, they would simply create a space for stories, for voices, for life. And as I look at the flourishing network of libraries throughout our neighborhood, each one a colorful expression of individuality and communal care, I know that those of us who dared to dream have made a difference. I urge anyone reading this, whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet town, to find your own creative outlet, your own little way to connect with others. Start small, build a box, share a book. You never know how one simple act can inspire an entire community to come together. Let this be a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come from the courage to break a rule, to challenge the norm, and to stand up for what you believe in. In a world that often feels chaotic and divided, a little bit of rebellion powered by love and literature can make all the difference. And so, every time I take a HOA, look down my street, and see another little library, a bright splash of color on a mundane front yard, I remember the power of that first act of defiance. I remember the smiles, the conversations, and the shared moments of joy that transcended the boundaries of property lines and regulations. I remember the community coming together, not because we were forced to, but because we chose to embrace each other's differences, to share our stories, and to celebrate the unifying magic of a good book. My journey is far from over. As new neighbors move in, as seasons change, and as more people discover the joy of shared reading, I continue to add new titles to my collection and welcome fresh energy and ideas from everyone around me. I hold on to the belief that every book left behind is an invitation to learn, to love, and to connect. I look forward to the future where our little reading revolution might spread even further, touching lives in ways we cannot yet imagine. For me, this library is more than a box of books. It is a symbol of hope, a testament to resilience, and a reminder that even in the face of adversity, people will always find a way to come together. It represents every whispered conversation on a porch, every tear shed over a cherished story, and every burst of laughter shared under the open sky. And as I invite you to join this revolution, I ask you, what story will you help write next? What book will you share with a neighbor or leave for a stranger? I built my little free library knowing it might be met with resistance, but I never imagined it would light up our entire community like it did. I took a chance, and that chance blossomed into something far greater than I ever could have predicted, a movement of love, literacy, and unity that continues to grow and inspire every single day. So here I stand, still in awe of the power of a simple idea, still grateful for every book exchanged, and forever hopeful for the future that we are building together. One shared story, one small act of defiance at a time. What book would you put in your library? I invite you to take that first step. Dare to build, dare to share, and dare to create a little revolution of your own.